Rain pounded against the cold, empty street, turning the asphalt into a mirror of gray despair. A small hand clutched the edge of a car door, trembling, while the other tried desperately to reach out to the world beyond the rain-streaked glass. Inside the sleek black SUV, the child's wide eyes darted between the shadowed figures outside and the man behind the wheel, a man whose smile was as cruel as the storm itself. The tires screeched as the engine roared, a sound that made the little chest heave with fear. Every instinct screamed for escape, but the doors were locked, the windows sealed, and the distance to safety felt like miles away. The child's tiny heart pounded like a drum of warning, echoing in the empty street that seemed to stretch into eternity. And then came a flash, headlights piercing through the downpour, engines growling like wolves ready to pounce. 30 seconds felt like an eternity as the child's mind raced, trapped between hope and terror. Who were these figures? Friends? Strangers? Angels in leather jackets? From the shadows, a group of men appeared, each astride a roaring motorcycle, the machines gleaming wet under the harsh neon lights of the city. Helmets tucked under arms, eyes fierce and unyielding, they stopped in formation ahead of the car like a barricade of steel and determination. Every inch of their presence screamed one message: no harm would come to this child. Inside the vehicle, panic crept into the man's eyes for the first time. He had thought this would be easy, just another day of control, another life bent to his will. But these bikers, 29 souls bound by loyalty and justice, were not ordinary men. They were guardians, warriors fueled by a code older than the streets themselves. The child's trembling hand found a glimmer of courage. A whisper of hope ignited in the depths of fear. For the first time, the storm outside felt less suffocating than the one inside the car. Something monumental was about to happen, something that would change a small life forever, and the world would bear witness. The engines revved again, closer, louder, a symphony of justice about to strike. And in that instant, the child realized, escape wasn't a dream. It was happening. Her name was Lily. At just 8 years old, she carried a weight no child should ever know. Behind the innocent sparkle of her eyes lay nights of whispered cries and days spent walking on eggshells, hoping to avoid the wrath of the man who claimed to be her guardian. He wasn't just cruel, he was calculated. Every decision, every threat, every manipulation was designed to break her spirit and keep her under control. Lily's mother had fought for her, time and again, but life had a way of complicating justice. Court orders, restraining mandates, and social worker warnings were like paper shields against a storm that refused to relent. The man who held her didn't just ignore the law, he thrived on it, exploiting loopholes, twisting words, and presenting a facade of calm civility that fooled everyone except Lily. She remembered the nights she lay awake, listening to his heavy footsteps across the apartment floor, imagining ways to escape, but knowing deep down that her options were limited. Friends at school noticed the bruises, the anxiety, the moments when she would flinch at a simple touch. They asked questions. She couldn't answer. Not yet. Lily had a heart full of hope, though. She drew little pictures of sunsets and rainbows on scraps of paper, tucked them away in her small backpack, dreaming of a day when fear wouldn't be her constant companion. She wrote secret notes to herself: stay strong. Help will come. It wasn't just optimism, it was a lifeline. Her father's absence only deepened the shadows. He had left years ago, leaving promises behind like ghostly echoes. Her mother tried, but even she was caught in the web of bureaucracy and threats, unable to physically protect her daughter every moment. And so, Lily's life became a careful dance of hiding pain, masking fear, and clinging to fleeting glimpses of safety. And then came the call that made her heart sink. Social services had determined that she would be temporarily taken from her mother's care and placed in a facility, a decision that, while intended for protection, felt to Lily like punishment. The man who terrorized her now had one last opportunity to tighten his grip, and he was moving fast. As the black SUV pulled up that rainy evening, the reality hit her like ice. The world she had known, filled with whispered reassurances and stolen moments of peace, was about to vanish. She had no control. No escape. And for the first time, the hope she had clung to felt fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm. But somewhere, not far from the rain-slick street, a force of unwavering justice was already on the move. A group that didn't care about rules, threats, or appearances. A group that answered to loyalty, courage, and the simple truth that children deserve safety above all else. Lily didn't know it yet, but the night was about to change forever. And her story, one of fear, resilience, and the fight for freedom, was about to be rewritten. The SUV didn't wait. It rolled forward with calculated precision, tires slicing through puddles as though they wanted to wash away every chance of escape. Inside, the man's eyes gleamed with triumph, a predator who believed he was untouchable. Each second that ticked by tightened the invisible chain around Lily's fragile hope. She tried to shrink into the seat, but it was no use. Her small frame couldn't hide her fear. The man leaned closer, a whisper of menace curling around her like smoke. "No one can stop this, Lily," he said, his voice a venomous lullaby. "Not your mother. Not anyone." Outside, the rain hammered down harder, drumming on the SUV like a countdown to despair. The city streets, once filled with flickering neon and distant laughter, now felt like a cage. Pedestrians hurried past, oblivious to the unfolding danger. Time was slipping, and with every meter the car moved, the distance to freedom seemed to vanish. Lily's breath hitched. She glanced at the side mirror and caught a glimpse of figures approaching, dark silhouettes against the storm. But the man noticed too, and his grin widened. "Ah, the cavalry thinks they can play hero," he sneered. "Too little, too late." He floored the accelerator, forcing the car forward with the fury of someone desperate to maintain control. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating his face, cruel, determined, and utterly unyielding. Every instinct screamed to run, to fight, but she was trapped. Helpless. Alone. Yet, amidst the rising terror, a subtle shift occurred. The distant roar of engines began to grow, faint but undeniable. It wasn't the city. It wasn't the storm. It was something else, something alive, powerful, and unafraid. A heartbeat of defiance racing toward them. Lily's eyes widened. A spark ignited, small, fragile, but undeniable. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. Maybe someone, somewhere, was coming to challenge the darkness that had loomed over her life for far too long. And in that moment, between the screeching tires and the storm's relentless howl, a fragile thread of hope tied her to the unknown force closing in. The man may have thought he was in control, but the game was about to change, and it would change violently, dramatically, and irrevocably. A low rumble rolled across the streets, faint at first, like distant thunder. Lily's gaze snapped to the darkness, eyes wide, heart pounding in her chest. The sound grew louder, a mechanical roar that shook the rain-slick pavement beneath the SUV. Tires squealed as the first motorcycle tore through a puddle, sending arcs of water into the night air. Then came another. And another. One after the other, engines growling like wolves circling their prey. In the flickering glow of streetlights, silhouettes emerged, 30 men, each on a gleaming motorcycle, leather jackets clinging to powerful frames. Their headlights cut through the rain like twin beams of judgment, and for the first time, Lily felt a flicker of hope. The man behind the wheel's grin faltered as he caught sight of the formation. His eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Who?" he stammered, voice shaking. But it was too late. The bikers were already in position. Tires screeched against wet asphalt as they fanned out, creating an unbreakable wall between the SUV and the empty streets beyond. The leader, a tall man with a silver streak through his hair and eyes that burned with unwavering determination, dismounted with fluid precision. Every step he took resonated authority. His voice cut through the storm like a blade. "Step out," he commanded, unwavering. "No one moves until this child is safe." The other bikers aligned themselves strategically, engines idling but ready to roar again at the slightest threat. Their unity was palpable, a single heartbeat of defiance against injustice. Rain plastered their jackets, mixed with mud and sweat, but they stood undeterred. Each one knew the stakes. Each one understood the cost of failure. Inside the SUV, panic rippled. The man's confidence, once unshakable, now trembled. He realized these weren't ordinary men. They didn't follow rules, they enforced justice. And they were not leaving until Lily was out. Lily felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. The fear inside her chest still throbbed, but it was interlaced with awe. These strangers, these warriors on steel horses, were here for her. They were not just blocking the car, they were reclaiming her life, reclaiming her freedom, reclaiming the stolen innocence that had been trapped under the man's control for too long. The leader raised a hand, signaling his crew to stay alert. Engines revved, tires gripping the street, every biker ready to respond in perfect synchronicity. And as the SUV attempted to inch forward, the combined force of 29 motorcycles created an unyielding wall, a living barrier fueled by courage, loyalty, and righteous anger. For the first time that evening, Lily dared to breathe. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, but now, it was no longer hers alone. The bikers had arrived, and they had brought with them a promise: justice would not wait, and no child would be taken without a fight. The man behind the wheel slammed his hands against it, panic overtaking every ounce of control he had clung to. Tires spun, but the wall of motorcycles didn't budge. The rain poured, mixing with the sweat on his brow, and for the first time, he felt cornered. The leader stepped forward, rain dripping from the edge of his helmet, boots firm against the slick asphalt. "It's over," he said, voice steady, cutting through the roar of engines and storm. "You won't harm her. Not today. Not ever." Inside the SUV, Lily's heart raced as she watched the man's confidence crumble. He tried to argue, to intimidate, but the sheer force of the bikers' presence, their unwavering unity and silent menace, swallowed every word. The leader moved closer, flanked by his crew, their eyes like coals burning with righteous fury. "You've terrorized her long enough," the leader continued. "You've broken laws, hearts, and every line of decency that exists. Today, it ends." The man's hands trembled as he reached for the door lock, but before he could react, another biker, larger than most, approached the passenger side, hand extended. "Open it," he commanded, a calm thunder underlying the words. "You know you can't win." A moment of silence fell. The storm seemed to pause, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Then, with a defeated sigh, the man reluctantly unlocked the doors. Lily's eyes widened, disbelief mingling with hope. She slowly opened the door, rain soaking her hair, heart hammering like a drum in her chest. The leader knelt down to her level, voice gentle now, offering a hand of reassurance. "You're safe," he whispered. "No one is taking you anywhere you don't want to go." She hesitated for a heartbeat, then grasped his hand. It was strong, warm, and certain, a lifeline pulling her out of a life that had been defined by fear and oppression. The bikers surrounded her, protective and unwavering, their presence an unspoken promise that no harm would come again. The man tried one last desperate plea, but the roar of engines drowned him out. By the time law enforcement arrived, alerted by an anonymous tip from a passerby who had witnessed the incredible scene, the bikers had already immobilized the threat. The man was taken into custody, exposed not just as a menace to Lily, but as a predator who had evaded justice for too long. As the rain continued to fall, the bikers watched quietly, ensuring Lily's safety until her mother arrived. Tears streamed down her face as she ran into her mother's arms, finally free from the chains of fear. Around them, the bikers melted back into the shadows of the city, engines fading like thunder retreating after a storm. The crowd that had gathered along the street whispered in awe, witnessing a spectacle that felt both unreal and righteous. The 29 men on motorcycles, ordinary men in extraordinary moments, had carved a path through fear, standing as guardians of justice. Their work was done, and though the city would soon forget the specifics, the impact on one small life, a life they had saved, was indelible. Lily looked back at them once, her tiny hand waving in gratitude. And in that instant, the storm outside mirrored the storm within, turbulent, yes, but now filled with hope, courage, and the quiet triumph of justice served. The rain had finally eased, leaving the streets glistening under the soft glow of streetlights. Lily sat safely in her mother's arms, the warmth of home and love washing over her like sunlight after a storm. For the first time in years, she felt the freedom to breathe, to laugh, to simply be a child without fear lurking behind every shadow. Her mother held her tightly, whispering promises that they would never be separated again. The weight that had burdened Lily's tiny shoulders for so long seemed to lift, replaced with relief, gratitude, and the faint, exhilarating spark of hope. Every tear that fell was now a testament to survival, resilience, and the unwavering power of courage. Outside, the motorcycles had disappeared into the night, their roaring engines fading into memory. No names were shouted, no faces remembered by the crowd that had gathered in awe, just the undeniable imprint of heroes who didn't fight for glory, but for justice. They left as silently as they had arrived, unsung guardians who had restored faith in a world too often overshadowed by fear. Lily looked out the window, catching the last glimpse of a motorcycle disappearing into the darkened streets. She pressed her small hand against the glass, a silent thank you whispered into the wind. And in her heart, she knew that courage, the courage of strangers united by justice, had changed her life forever. The night settled into calm, but the memory of the storm, the engines, and the fearless riders lingered. For Lily, it wasn't just a rescue. It was a promise, that even in the darkest moments, hope could arrive roaring down the street, relentless, unyielding, and unstoppable. And for anyone watching this story, remember, courage can come from the most unexpected places, and justice, though sometimes delayed, can still find a way. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends, and subscribe for more powerful stories.